put some Asians in literally anything right now. The amount of backslide in our representation on screen is effing appalling. Studios think we are risky. And then he started to talk about, quote, every single one, a financial success. No Asian actor has ever lost a studio even close to $100 million, but a white dude will lose $200 million twice and roll right into the next tentpole lead. We're fighting a deeply prejudiced system, and most days it sucks, end quote.
Somebody else would say, get in line. What up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Gen Report. I'm your host, Pablo, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Brian Schultz. Marvel Roundup. A lot of things happening there. We got Avengers Doomsday tidbits, Kelsey Grammer comments, Avengers Doomsday RDJ Thanksgiving post, and the teaser hitting sooner than we think. We got Daredevil season 2 delayed, which is interesting. I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that. Simu Liu goes off on Hollywood. I'm telling you, man. You know what? It made me think of Ray Fisher and his career and where he's at right now. So we'll talk about this situation with Simu Liu. And Thomas Jane reflects on Punisher, Brian. This is going to be an interesting conversation because I kind of enjoyed that movie. But let's get started with Avengers Doomsday tidbits. Kelsey Grammer, Brian.
Sometimes you like the older actors. I've made this comment in a reference to like Ian McKellen. They reached that age where they just don't give up anymore. And so like when they're doing interviews, they're like this whole secrecy thing and, I can't say anything. They don't care, And so Kelsey Grammer literally started to rattle off his experience on Avengers Doomsday and all the scenes that he got to share with different actors. And so he said I got to work with I got to work with Downey, obviously, which was great. And he's like, I never worked with Chris Hemsworth before. And he's like, that was really fun to do. It's like, okay, so Thor and Beast sharing a scene. He's like, I also had significant time on screen with Pedro Pascal. And that was very nice. So, okay, Reed Richards and Beast. So it feels like Beast is getting around a little bit in this
he's an intellect.
In this movie. But he said basically, he was being all positive, but he was rattling off these different scenes where you would sort of say like, interesting, a 20th century Fox X-Man sharing screen time with these different pieces of both sort of like the Infinity Saga MCU and then with Fantastic Four, obviously the latest iteration. So I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a lot of what this movie is, and I'd be curious as to your thoughts on it. It is a lot of like mix and match, right? A lot of you've got so many actors and you have so many teams. A lot of what constitutes fun, I guess, for the audience is like who you get to see on screen at the same time, whether it's in an action set piece or in a conversation. We've talked about some of the most obvious ones, right? Like Thor and Loki, with Loki holding the strands of time. Like that's a layup one, right? It's a slam dunk one. What are some of the other ones you're actually interested in? Like, did anything here kind of catch your eye? Like, oh, I never thought about that, but I'd be curious to see Beast speaking with Reed. I don't know. I was curious as to what you thought about that and whether there are any other combinations of characters we haven't really seen a lot of or haven't seen for a long time that you are actually, when you think about it, kind of looking forward to seeing on the big screen again.
I mean, Beast, for me, Kelsey Grammer as Beast has always been a good, he looked amazing to me. And obviously his voice lends itself to a characterization of Beast that hits the mark. And because he's an intellect and he has an interesting cadence in how he speaks and how you would imagine Beast would be, I think having him in a room with, I don't know if if Beast and Thor work for me because of how silly Thor has been. Perhaps he's made a turning point, Brian. Thor, because Chris Hemsworth has acknowledged where things went wrong. And so he may pivot a little bit in terms of how he portrays himself. So that is, I'm curious, but not excited. who else did he share screen time with?
Well,
Oh,
Downey.
Pedro
obviously.
Pascal.
No, but that's so. Yeah, go for it.
The
Reed is the
Pedro,
one that got my interest.
yes. Because the conversation, Reed speaks at another level when it comes to certain ideas that sound crazy. So having Beast and Reed having conversations where Beast understands and poses questions and gets enlightened, and you hear him say, fascinating. I want to see how that goes. That's what I want to see.
100% agree. I immediately, when he said it, I was like envisioning like a nerd out science scene where Reed is like stretching from like chalkboards on either side of the room, and Beast is hanging upside down with his little spectacles on, and the two of them are just like going back and forth. And maybe you have a few of the other Avengers or Fantastic Four experts are sitting in the room basically doing the comic relief of like, what the hell are these two talking about? The kind of deal. I actually was like, that one, I was like, that's a good idea if you write it well. I think that could be a fun scene. You're right. The Thor. The only thing with the Thor one I thought of was as a comedy, to be quite honest, where Thor would be some kind of joke about like Thor being like, "Well, I fought the green guy in Avengers 1 and Hulk, and what now you want me to fight the blue guy?" Like something like that, where they're kind of riffing on the past. But you're right. There's really nothing actor chemistry wise that really made a ton of sense there. I don't like that. Really kind of would get me to buy in. Downey kind of obviously has to work with everyone, especially if he's playing with Doom. So I don't know what that would look like. That felt more like a set piece. That felt more like a Beast might be trying to antagonize Doom, and as part of the X-Men fight scene or whatever it is. But you're right. Beast with Reed. I was like, oh yeah, I like that. I hope. And he said it was significant time, so I said, I hope that's we do get to hear the nerd out. A little bit of the two of them together. So, but then it did get me thinking of like, yeah, some of these combos of ones you haven't seen historically, like, do you think that would be cool? So then I was like, all right, like, okay, so what I put, where, like, who would I want Ian McKellen to talk to, for example, or like, who would you want Patrick Stewart to talk to in the Avengers that you didn't get to see either in Multiverse of Madness or in X-Men? I think that's kind of where I started to take my mind to try to convince myself this movie can be better than I think it's going to be.
I read an article where it said it captured the I guess the spectacle that is Avengers Doomsday, and the writer started off by saying the star-studded film or whatever, the star-studded. Like, I care about their star power in this movie. I don't. I care about the characters,
Yeah. But like, I thought about like, if you had a conversation between McKellen and assuming Chris Evans is back as Steve, like that would be one where I was like, okay, you have this holistic, virtuous view of how to fight a battle and how to win a war versus how Magneto approaches it. And you kind of subbed in Steve Rogers' sensibilities for Charles Xavier's. I was like, that might be like something you've never seen on screen that could be interesting to watch for a couple of minutes. So, it just got me thinking in those regards. So, I mean, there's always the obvious of like, oh, we got to get to the Downey thing, because there's the obvious of like who Downey runs into from the old crew and like how impactful that winds up being. And he threw something into the ether that has got people buzzing about exactly how much Robert Downey you're going to get in this movie and in what form.
The hints of Deadpool and Wolverine. What have you read about that? Because I haven't heard too much other than, the rumors and stuff like that. But what now points to their definitive participation in this movie?
Yeah. So Forbes had a piece talking about Deadpool and Wolverine, the movie, in retrospect. And they actually kind of included, almost in passing, a mention that both of them were going to be in the next two Avengers films, like as if it was certain and confirmed, which had not been put in print by any of that type of publication before. So that was interesting that was out there. What came out about Hugh Jackman was, it seems like all signs point to his involvement is quite small. Like whatever it is in Doomsday, he does not have much to do. even in the context of the 20th Century Fox X-Men. It sounds like he's being held, kind of maybe similar to the Holland Spider-Man. Like he might have a bigger part in Secret Wars, but he doesn't have much to do in Doomsday. Mm-hmm. Reynolds is more complicated because, as we heard behind the scenes, there's been this like, are the Deadpool writers gaining some traction here versus the Legacy Avengers writers? And, we haven't heard anything about how much Reynolds is going to be involved in terms of on-screen time himself. So, but Wolverine, it sounds like maybe we don't get to see a ton of, at least in this version. And as someone pointed out, right, he was, if you think that the Deadpool and Wolverine movie had any stakes for Doomsday, he should be a really significant figure in this equation, right? Because he's the anchor being. He was described as the anchor being, right, of that storyline. So theoretically, if Doom is now coming through and effectively trying to destroy and eradicate timelines, one would assume Hugh Jackman has to be one of the primary marks for that, right? So maybe they're simply holding that showdown for Secret Wars.
Secret Wars certainly makes more sense because of, again, I refer to how Secret Wars came about and how it was done in the Spider-Man cartoon, where Spider-Man is choosing heroes that he needs this team for in order to play this crazy games. This is like Squid Games back in the day. You know what I'm saying? So again, if this is the reset, because we've said this, I mean, we've said this for years. The reset is coming, and Secret Wars will be the thing that does it. Once it was announced, Secret Wars is definitely the thing that resets everything. And so why not go out with the past, right? I see why they are including all of these characters, Brian. Make no mistake about it. I understand what they're doing here. How they put it all together, that's the question in terms of telling a good story and not just cameos and this dude saying one line and jokey, and because if it gets too jokey, Brian,
if you believe Endgame is any template, and we have seen Marvel has been trying to rehash, for better or for worse. Part of the beauty and the genius of Endgame was the way they roped in almost all these films from the prior 12 years, right? You went back to New York, you went back to Asgard, you went back to, Vormir. You went back to these places that you'd seen and be like, oh yeah, I remember those movies. If you borrowed that template for this, that would then send you back to, we're back in X2, or we're back. So you see what I'm saying? Or we're back in Deadpool 1, or we're back in, if they pull that playbook again, you couldn't, or we're back somewhere in the Loki TV series, right? Like they could do that as a way to integrate and then dispatch a lot of these characters if they wanted. And that would be sort of a tried and true method that I think some critics some fans would call them on as being like, hey, you already did that. Why are you doing that again? But I simply pointed out as a possibility given, we know Kevin has been kind of saying like, I want to outdo the portal scene, right? There's this fixation on what we've done before and trying to almost riff on that and update it.
You want to do the RDJ post?
Yeah. So Robert Downey Jr. posted an image on his socials for Thanksgiving. It was like it was almost like a comic style image. And it was like a wishing bone, the wishbone from Thanksgiving turkey. And it was held on one end by the Iron Man glove. And it was held on the other end by Dr. Doom's glove. And he basically was implying, see you soon. And those sort of people have read into like, does that mean he will actually show up as Iron Man in Doomsday in addition to showing up primarily as Victor Von Doom?
Again, we speculated in the past, or I speculated this specifically about his visit to Franklin Richards and Franklin Richards changing his face to look like Tony Stark. So at the end of the day, the hope for me anyway is that we still don't know who Doom is. But I think he's doing that in order as part of his plan. Because apparently we also heard some story lines or plot details regarding him using Tony Stark as to trick these foes into believing that he's the good guy and he's this Tony Stark's, and then he changes on them, right? So in order to do that, he has to possibly wear this Iron Man. So I think is at the same time, Brian, they're taking, because they're borrowing from the comics, they're creating these classic situations where Doom was Iron Man, right? We've seen, they said they're going to probably bring back Thanos, and we're going to see Doom ripping the spine out of Thanos. We might see that. So it makes sense that this could be a possibility. It doesn't surprise me. How they pull it off and how it makes sense within the storyline is the question, you know?
Yeah. And whether it's, again, is he playing from somewhere in the timeline, the actual Tony Stark that we're familiar with? Is he playing alt universe Iron Man? And that's kind of his entry point. We'll see. But he is floating this idea that he will get to do both in Doomsday. So that was his contribution to the tidbits pile. Sounds like we are getting the footage maybe a little sooner. The official account teased something about kind of the world is watching as like a hint that the teaser might be coming. Maybe sooner than the original. It's going to be attached to Avatar, and that'll be the first kind of week that you see it. I think there's a possibility of that simply because, as we've talked about on this show, there's an incredible amount of high-profile content that is likely getting its first reveal in the next month. And they may be wanting to get out in front of that, including Disney's own and Sony's own Brand New Day. Because, we'll talk about in The Void, the Odyssey is making a real push here in the holiday season to grab some
Supergirl
eyeballs.
too, right?
We don't know that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but He-Man is out there as a big, likely coming in the next month, right? So my point is that there's a lot of this similar target audience that is going to be hit hard with first footage or first big footage of huge projects for 2026. And so they may have looked at their original timeline and say, hey, maybe we want to get this out this coming week because we want people buzzing about Avengers first before they start talking about He-Man, Spider-Man, and the Odyssey.
It better be good, Brian.
Well, Marvel does good trailers, though. Like I said, they are pretty good at selling you. Even when movies aren't that good, they usually cut some decent trailers.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Fantastic Four. I'm not saying Fantastic Four is a bad movie, but that was a really good promotional campaign with the theme song. And
yeah. I can't get that song out of my head. I'm out. John Rambo. I can't get it out of my head. That and I'm a punk rocker. Yes, I am. Daredevil. Season 2 delayed, Brian. What are your thoughts on that and what's happening there?
Well, not confirmed, but they initially had said March 4th, 2026, exactly 1 year after season 1. There are certain spots, including the Marvel and Disney website, which still say March 26, but no longer have the date. There's also a couple of spots which now just say 2026 and no longer have the month. So that's leading to speculation that this release date may move around. To me, the biggest thing about this is everything we've heard that leads into Brand New Day. We've heard about like Punisher. We've heard about, even like The Hand. Like there's stuff supposedly in this second season that is supposed to lay groundwork for what you get in Spider-Man. Yeah. So this can't get delayed that much, right? Because it's supposed to come out in March originally. Spider-Man's supposed to come out in July. And the show, they don't drop everything at once, right? They do a couple episodes and then they do one a week. So you kind of need 2 months for this show to run, which sort of says to me, if you're delaying it, are they going to really delay this to the point where it's like what we suggested for the Penguin, where they release this in May and they back it right into Brand New Day? They actually end the show a week or two before that movie comes out? Possibility. The tricky part there, though, is you're now releasing it into summer movie season. So you're counting on people watching that at home in and around when they're going to see the likes of He-Man and some of this other big stuff that's Michael Jackson biopic, some other big stuff that's coming out. That seems a little more risky than getting out
That's
front.
why it better be good. The things that
And
they put
Lanterns
out
just vacated, right? Lanterns was going to be head to head with this show, and Lanterns gave up the first quarter slot. If I was Daredevil, I'd be trying to nail down that March release date any way I could.
Yeah. Again, the first season of Daredevil Born Again had its apparent flaws based on the conversations that we've had, Brian. You and I think most people would agree. There was a bit of non-cohesion in the story being told.
It is doomed to fail. It's an impossible task. When you have a show that's shot with one tone, with one set of people, and it gets ripped up midway through, and they bring the old people back to try to salvage it, but they don't have the money to like redo it, just no precedent for that combination leading to a great outcome. This season will be the litmus test of whether they still have the magic or not, because it is the same crew from Netflix, the same personnel. They get to craft the last 9 episodes exactly the way they want with one tone. So if they mess that up, then there's no excuse.
Simu Liu goes off.
He did.
Again, I thought about Ray Fisher. And I looked at his IMDb. I think he only has like a couple of projects, but you haven't seen him around in a lot of stuff other than Rebel Moon.
No.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because he went scorched earth.
Simu Liu, like Walter White said to
Hank Schrader, yeah.
My advice to you is to tread lightly. And it doesn't seem like Simu Liu likes to play that. I'm going to say it again, Brian. I have none against Simu Liu as far as I liked him in Parks and not that. What's the name of that show? Kim's Convenience.
Kim's Convenience. Yeah,
I liked him in that.
Excellent show on Netflix.
I think he was. At first, I had high hopes when he was casted as Shang-Chi, but how he played it or how they had him play it wasn't a good fit. And it just for me, as far as who Shang-Chi is, if you think about the comics and where the inspiration comes from, that didn't connect for me. And so for me, Shang-Chi, the character, didn't hit the high marks I had hoped it would have. But now he's talking other stuff. What's going on there?
So we know he's in Avengers Doomsday. And I guess he was in a better mood the other day when he called that movie the love letter to superhero movies, and how awesome that was and all that sort of stuff, because he went in a different direction on his threads this past week, where he talked about Asian representation in Hollywood projects. Quote, put some Asians in literally anything right now. The amount of backslide in our representation on screen is effing appalling. Studios think we are risky. And then he started to talk about, he listed films like Shang-Chi, Crazy Rich Asians, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Minari, Farewell, Past Lives. And he said, quote, every single one, a financial success. No Asian actor has ever lost a studio even close to $100 million, but a white dude will lose $200 million twice and roll right into the next tentpole lead. We're fighting a deeply prejudiced system, and most days it sucks. End quote.
Somebody else would say, get in line.
I was like, there are other groups that probably would just like repost that,
change a few things up, but hey, that's why you make your own stuff, right? That's why you make your own stuff. Because if you think about individuals who have made movies where there's still some diversity, but the majority is apparent. Harlem Nights, Sinners, Boomerang. You know, there are other movies out there but people make it happen. And I don't think he should depend on them to make it happen. I think he should, if he's cool with everybody, now he's in the room, right? I'm pretty sure he can have conversations with people. Yo, let's make this movie. This is my idea. Don't depend on them to make it. Make it. That's my perspective on it.
This is where it's like, so is there validity to what he's saying? I would say yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about on this show, again, you and I are a little at odds over the Shang-Chi movie because of our own expectations. But I do fall back on in the context of COVID, this was a box office success. And there really is no other Marvel precedent for a project being treated in the aftermath the way this one was.
Yeah.
Meaning there's never been a sequel. There's really never been no movement. There's never really been any movement on a sequel. It was never even like on one of Kevin's big boards as like a planned project. So there is this little, and yet Destin Cretton obviously remains like a favored son of Marvel because he's directing Brand New Day. And I would say there's talk that Kevin wants to have him do an Avengers movie after Secret Wars. Even though he was supposed to do Kang Dynasty, now there's talk he might do something down the road. But there is something about the Shang-Chi project that like Disney and Marvel got cold feet over afterwards, right? Because they technically made money on it. And it's the only one that never got any follow-up. So he's like, that's where it leads you to like, is that about the culture? Is it about Simu Liu? Like they don't know what to do with that and they're not comfortable with it. And like when he makes comments like this to like, this is
the
that,
anticipation
right?
of having to deal with that builds.
Yeah, that there is
Constantly.
some buyer's there is some buyer's remorse on like having, so this is where it's like Simu Liu on the one hand is using his platform as a member of the MCU and being in the new Avengers movie to speak out on an issue which is not without merit and probably is worthy of discussion. But you also have to recognize that like in his position, that is a somewhat precarious position. And I made the joke to you, but it's only kind of a half joke where it's like, we know that this movie is incredibly cluttered. We know that this movie is going to like, there's some things that are going to end up on the cutting room floor. And I just tossed out the idea like, well, you know, like he makes comments like this. This is now something that on the Avengers Doomsday press tour, if Simu Liu is out there promoting this movie, guess what is going to be a talking point, which is, I'm sure, is what he wants. But that may not be what Disney wants. And if that's not what Disney wants, does that then lead them to like say lean on the Russos to say, hey, those Simu Liu scenes, you need those? You sure you need those?
We Simu Liu calling Ray Fisher. Hey, how'd you handle that, man? How was that experience?
Well, after this, though, if they were to put his scenes on the cutting room floor, I mean, I feel like, you know, we need to do like a Simu Liu Bo de Mayo, like, you know, Zoom call. But
I think Simu Liu is just, he may not be getting the calls. He may not be getting the opportunities that he perhaps is seeking. I haven't seen that range in him yet. So.
But the question is he not getting those calls because of his ethnicity, or is he not getting those calls because of his propensity to stir the pot? Because on Kim's Convenience,
I think he's becoming because of that.
Pot, right? Like on Kim's Convenience, again, I don't know all the ins and outs of this. I do think that show was a Canadian show that found real success in syndication on Netflix. And there were plans to do a spinoff of the only main cast member who was not Asian. And the Asian cast went nuts.
Yeah, I would go crazy
led
too.
by Simu Liu, which I get. Like the show is about a Korean convenience store.
Yeah.
So the idea that you would do a spinoff about the non-Korean is kind of like I get that you would feel a certain way about that. But my point is when you start to develop a pattern of being the guy in the room who every time something like this happens, you try to burn the house down. That's where is your agent struggling to find roles for you because of the one thing or because of the other?
Yeah.
And to your point, this is not the only group that can make that claim. As someone who is half Asian, it's interesting. We just kind of went through a version of this at WB, and it was very quiet. We don't talk about it because it wasn't really our thing, but like this Paul Thomas Anderson, One Battle After Another movie where, Paul Thomas Anderson is white. He's one of the most celebrated working directors today, but he's very much like an artsy director, right? He's not a blockbuster director. And so the controversy was, how did this guy get a $150 million budget when he's never made, like none of his movies had ever made like $150 million total. So Warner Brothers was basically saying, we know we're going to lose money. And they did. But we want the Oscar buzz of this movie, and we're willing to give him basically a blank check. That led to people saying, would they have done that for a director of color? And then people pointed right back at WB and said, do you remember how controversial it was and how risky it was perceived that Ryan Coogler got $90 million to make Sinners? Now that wound up paying off handsomely, right? But what people pointed out was the perception going in. Coogler, one of the most celebrated Black directors working today, who had generated billion-dollar films via Black Panther, was seen as a risk to give $90 million to make Sinners, an original concept. Whereas Paul Thomas Anderson, who's never made bank in anything, albeit been nominated for Oscars, got almost twice that much to make a movie that the studio knew they were going to lose money on. That became a racial talking point around, which is kind of similar to what Simu Liu's saying. It's a different version of the same coin, right? Because Simu Liu makes that comment about the white guy losing all sorts of money and then getting another shot, versus the Asian guys have no margin for error, even if Asian actors have no margin for error, even if they have success. That's effectively the same discussion that was being had about the Coogler versus Paul Thomas Anderson.
Did Running Man lose money, right? It definitely
absolutely. Yeah, it's going to lose money for sure.
But yeah, Glenn Powell's going to get that shot. He's still going to get that shot.
He's already got it. Yeah. Actually, there's a trailer for a small movie he did that looks pretty good, like How to Make a Killing. I saw that. Was pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're right. He'll get more shots.
If you strike out, you got to still go up to the plate.
But he's saying they don't get to leave the dugout, right? Simu Liu's saying we don't get to leave the dugout. We don't get to the plate.
Yeah, I get that as well.
I think you could again put in not just Asian actors into that. I think
unless you're Otani, baby.
African American actors, Latino actors, I think they would feel similarly that their margin of safety is not nearly the same. And that's sort of the point. But the timing is just interesting as we're about to get this first Avengers teaser and Simu Liu's in news as Shang-Chi for the first time since 2021. And then we get this like immediately.
Interesting situation that we have to keep an eye on.
Before we leave it, though, I think you and I are in agreement. I think whatever his role is in these next two Avengers movies will be the last time you see Simu Liu play Shang-Chi.
Oh, yeah.
I think the character will come back at some point, but it will not be as with him.
Yeah. Thomas Jane reflects on Punisher.
His Punisher. Yeah, we don't talk about his Punisher from 2004.
I remember seeing the Dolph Lundgren Punisher with Luke Gossett Jr. As a kid, I thought it was all right. I don't know if I could watch it now, but I'll try. I'll probably make the attempt to do so because he definitely fit the look. Thomas James, and also we got Ray Stevenson, but Thomas James came first before Ray Stevenson, and correct. I wasn't opposed to that film. I think John Travolta was sort of like the weakest part of it.
100%.
Yeah. And it didn't live up to him as Punisher, I liked, though. Him as Punisher, I liked. I wasn't mad at his Punisher. I would have wanted to see a second, especially how it ended. I wanted to see what was his pursuit like in terms of seeking the sort of justice that he seeks. So what were your thoughts on his reflection, as he reflected on his turn as the Punisher?
Well, let's give you his quote, and then let's talk a little bit about that movie that kind of has been lost to time. So Thomas Jane said, quote, "I was miscast as Frank Castle. He's an Italian. He's got black hair, whole different sort of lineage. He was born in the 70s, the antithesis of the Italian mob. They had taken over the world briefly. Godfather came out of that too, and Frank was the answer to that. I'm not that guy. I had to dye my hair black and become a different guy, and I'm happy the part is played now by someone who is more right for that role. I had fun. I did the best I could with it. I'm very grateful for it, but I'm not that guy." End quote. I didn't think he was that bad.
Yeah, I thought he was fine.
I actually think he's the best part of that movie. That is one of the weirdest. So you bring up Travolta. That is one of the weirdest cast movies that I've ever seen in the genre. Rebecca Romijn makes no sense in that movie to me. Like why is she the neighbor, like the attractive neighbor out of nowhere? I see like a sore thumb, right? Travolta's version of Howard Saint makes no sense to me.
How is she in the hood?
even like the random, like Roy Scheider is his dad, like at the beginning, and I'm like, and I think like Samantha Mathis is the wife that gets killed. It is like one of those like weird, and then they get Kevin Nash is the wrestler, is the Russian. Like it's a weird cast, like all the way through. But I actually think he's not bad. Like it's not necessarily what I would expect Castle to be, but he does it pretty convincingly. Like Thomas Jane is one of those weird, like I usually like him. Like first off, he's awesome as Mickey Mantle in 61. Like he is Mickey Mantle in that movie as someone who's a Yankee fan. But like I always thought he could have had a bigger career and just he wasn't quite in the right place at the right time. And this role felt very much along those lines where it's like he gets in great shape. He seems very angry and foreboding. Some of the kills are pretty cool, and the movie doesn't really do all that well because it's sort of in this odd time, right? It's 2004. So this is pre-Batman Begins. Like you have the X universe, you have Blade, and that's kind of all, and Spider-Man. That's kind of what's out there. But yeah, I listened. I was like, I think he's a little hard on himself. Like, I don't think he's the perfect Frank Castle, but like, I don't think he should look. I don't think he should look back at that and say that he failed at it either.
These guys can they can be harsh on their own performances and what they perceive themselves to be good at and what they perceive themselves to be bad at and what they could have been casted for, what they weren't casted for and didn't fit. But I thought he did a good job as Frank Castle. I didn't mind them. Again, especially how they ended it. I would have wanted to see more, but obviously the movie did it was I mean, Punisher's hard, to make money off of.
It is hard.
So
because then like he was supposed to come back obviously in Warzone and then doesn't, and Ray Stevenson takes over that role. Stevenson's not bad either, right? He's bigger, has dark hair, but he's not, but he plays it a little differently.
Yeah.
He's not bad either in that movie. So it's like, it's one of those weird things where you're like seeing these iterations, and now we've got Bernthal where it's like the Frank Castle part of this has not really been, in my mind, the liability as to why Punisher has never blown up. I think it's what you said. It's that it's a niche-y type of thing because it's very hard R and like getting but it's a comic book character. So like getting people to really come out for that is tough. It's just not a $1 billion project. That's just not what it's ever going to be.
Yeah. I think what they've done with him on TV is fine. He's good for TV. And if there was a movie, he'd be fine as a supporting character, but not as lead. I don't think we need 2 hours of Frank Castle.
Well, I agree, because also like in the history of film and TV, like Death Wish, right? We've done this idea of the wronged vigilante, coming back, who's not Batman, who's more vicious, who just crosses the line at every turn and seeks revenge. Like, we've got plenty of those already. I mean, even John Wick really is sort of a stylized version of a Frank Castle. It's just the dog is the catalyst for his comeback. So yeah, I think it's just tough for him to carve out a lane, as you said, as like a mainstream leading man. But I do think, as like a guy you go to for certain types of jobs. That's why I think I am interested to see how he hooks up with Spider-Man. Like that is like a thing on paper that like we know has happened in the comics, but like in our version of the movie world with Holland,
how does that come about?
Seems tricky. but I'm interested.
Yeah, let us know in the comment section below what you guys think of this episode of Marvel Roundup, Avengers Doomsday stuff, RDJ posting, Daredevil season 2 being delayed possibly, Simu Liu going rogue and saying stuff that's gonna, hopefully, I mean, stuff like that doesn't hurt your career, but it could. If it's, you know what I'm saying? If you're over the top with it, and not necessarily he doesn't have a good perspective on it. It's just he's very direct, and it could rub people the wrong way. And it's a very, dicey situation, I would say. And Thomas Jane, man, I think he did a fantastic job as Punisher, man.
Exactly.
That was a good iteration of it. But yeah, let us know in the comment section below what you guys think of all we said about this Marvel Roundup episode. And remember, if you haven't heard it anywhere else, you heard it here first on the Nerd Gen Report.